This is an interview with Kurtis, who at the time of this recording is the #1 player on Longshanks. What makes this extra special is that he got there playing A-Force, a faction that is largely seen as among the worst in the game. Before we get into the interview, this episode is available both on my YouTube channel, Vincent Curkov, and on the Alfredo Size 3 Taco Truck and Marvel Crisis Protocol podcast feed. If you haven't checked out the YouTube channel or the podcast, you should. I think they're pretty good. Second, the #1 spot on Longshanks is largely symbolic. The difference in skill among the top 25 players is essentially imperceptible. So if this interview, I'm not saying that Kurtis is better than all the other great players, but they are indisputably his peers.
So I guess with that going on, where do you see A-Force in the meta? Are you just outskilling opponents and you're just picking a low tier faction to just style on them? Or is there something going on here that we don't know about?
Well, what I think the problem is that they look at how the affiliation is designed, and I think that leads to some non-competitive roster building decisions.
Okay.
Because A-Force is, if you look at them, it's we have drop off and we have an unlimited indomitable for a turn, and so I have to build this list to be able to drop off She-Hulk in the center of the board and start punching people and take advantage of this banned card that we only have.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you end up doing then is building a roster around She-Hulk and all these flyers that are affiliated. And I mean, it kind of works, but I just don't think that's the best way to play them. And She-Hulk is such a squishy model into so many things that flying her to the center of the board on round 1 to just get demolished, or saying, well, I'm going to send Okoye to the center of the board first, so at least she has a bodyguard when she gets there, and Okoye gets demolished. It's just, I don't know, I don't think it's a good strategy, but I think the way the game is designed, it encourages you to build it that way. And so I think A-Force is actually really good, but you almost can't think of them as a affiliation. I think they would almost be better off if they didn't have that card, because you would build the list differently and around different stuff.
Okay. Cool. All right. So you're not the biggest fan of special delivery then?
No, when I play A-Force, my primary core is basically Okoye, Black Cat, and She-Hulk. And the biggest strength of them is that core has 2 bodyguards and 2 staggers. And so it happens to be really good at taking very high threat characters' attacks and giving them one of them every turn and sending it into my 2 threat. So it can be very frustrating for these models like Malekith, which are everywhere, to get a stagger on them, throw the size 4 away, and they come charging in all excited to kill She-Hulk or an extract holder, and they end up putting 1 attack into Okoye, and that's the turn. It's, if you think about any game with resource management, taking your 7 to do half damage to my 2, in a 15-point game, then it's well, I'm playing 13 versus 8 with the rest of my characters because this giant centerpiece model that you've invested so many resources in just isn't doing anything. And so that to me is the strategy is you can use A-Force and that core of bodyguards and those staggers that they have naturally and really limit the power of your opponent's big models and really decide where attacks are going to go. And so that's the second piece that I like exploiting a lot is whenever I get attacked, not only am I deciding who it goes into, but I'm also giving power to characters who I want. And I think A-Force has a unique ability. I don't know of anyone else in the game where you can have a model after the power phase start with 2 power, and by the time they activate, they have 5 power without ever being attacked. It's one of those things in the game where if you see a Black Cat on 2 power, for example, you go, well, I'm just not going to attack her. She's never going to generate the power to steal an extract off me. And so I can just leave her alone and do nothing. The problem with A-Force is the second you attack into any other character I have, she now has 3 power to go steal something. And often what's happening is she's going to move and steal something and then get back into the range of the bodyguards. And so it creates this puzzle where you can't really attack her to take extracts off her because I'm diverting those attacks into She-Hulk or into Okoye. And as you're attacking, I'm also powering up effects like Beta Ray Bill's throw or Dr. Voodoo's possession. You know, all these effects that are letting me then control you even further, steal things, and essentially make you attack into my 2-threat who's not scoring any points while the other characters are standing on secures, holding extracts, and being able to activate if, say, you went with priority and we're trying to go into a key model so I can't activate, well, I'm going to let Okoye die instead of, say, Red Skull or Domino, who's going to be able to then go and, you know, do a lot of damage and take out other opponents' key activations. So I've just really enjoyed the kind of, I'm parrying your attacks into models who have activated already, my 2 threats, people that aren't going to die by using sacrifice and all the bodyguards, and then I'm using the leadership to power up those effects and waiting to activate characters until they hit a certain power level where they get the activation I want out of them. Right? Okay. So that might be like Black Cat gets a hop and a steal, or Beta Ray Bill gets a throw and gets to pick up an extract or flip a point. So I don't know if that explains it, but that's kind of my thought process behind it.
It definitely. So I think part of what's going on here is that the meta is in a very specific place. I think this is part of why Shield is strong right now as well. Like Shield just kind of dunks on big boys. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like your list just dunks on big boys as well. Like that's just like, if you know that like half the meta is going to be playing a 7-threat model, just being like, well, I'm going to take half of that model's activations away or actions away.
Yeah, and you know, when you talk about Shield and how you don't care if you lose priority because their priority activation is going to be useless with Eye on the Sky and Got Your Backs and Sacre, like all the stuff Shield does. A-Force is kind of the same way. It's like, I'm happy to kill your models, lose prio, activate last and score points, and then everybody's going to wake up and you're going to have to put 2 attacks into Okoye. And it's like, okay, I can lose prio. And you know, normally to activate last and score points, you then can open yourself up to a swing turn where you get just murdered the next turn when they have prio. But this list doesn't care about that, just like with yours. And so it allows you to really score points effectively and not see the clapback turns that normally come with that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And so like, how are you able to, I guess, all right. So I'm just trying to solve this problem here. Yeah. So like, it sounds like a big part of your plan, like relies on being able to use Okoye and probably a little bit of She-Hulk to like, essentially like this bodyguard, like Gordian knot type situation, right? Mm-hmm. How do you make sure that like, or what tools do you have to prevent them from taking the Gordian knot apart? Or are those tools just like not present in what is being played largely right now? Because like, for example, Shield, I don't got a lot of way to move your models. Like if you're going to stand in a double bodyguard bubble, I'm just going to kill the bodyguard models. And then then when they're done, then I'll shoot the thing that I want to shoot.
Yeah. Well, it takes a bit of practice, and you know, Shield is a very good example, because let's say there's a hypothetical situation where She-Hulk is standing next to Okoye and you've got Iron Man and you're going to Helio She-Hulk into next Tuesday, and you say, okay, I'm going to attack Okoye with my first attack, push her away, and then I'm going to Helios She-Hulk. Mm-hmm. What I'm getting better at as I get more experience is saying, well, I'm actually going to bodyguard the first attack onto She-Hulk, and you're going to do damage and push her. I'm going to aggressive back into range of Okoye, and now you're sitting there with Helios into a 2-threat, or, you know, it parries that.
Yeah, okay.
You know, then there's situations where if I know which models you have that are capable of displacing She-Hulk or throwing Okoye away or things like that, I'm really intentional about not activating the 2 of them as much as possible until those models that have those tools have gone. So there's no simple answer, but there's a bit of finesse in there to say, well, if I know your plan is to take Beast and throw Okoye away, I'm not going to go with her yet, so that when you throw her away, I'm going to move her back. Like, that's kind of the idea there.
Yeah, so again, it has like so much to do with like fundamentally understanding like the tempo of what's going on in the game and what is actually like in threat or in danger. And
Yeah.
then like pulling the trigger on those things and knowing when like spending the activation changes whether or not you're at risk, I guess. Like is
Yeah.
not to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like She-Hulk is much more susceptible once Okoye has activated.
Well, yeah, and once she's activated too, right? Because she has the tools to, if she could move, throw someone away and move back, or she could attack someone with a slow and do that. So she's got some tools to keep herself safe, or in theory, she could move into range of Okoye. But what I'm noticing is that with the two of them together, I'm doing a lot more bodyguarding onto She-Hulk with the small attacks from my opponent, and then trying to save the big attacks to go on to Okoye. And so it's a little more nuanced. Like, for example, if Red Skull's grunts activate, I'll take those two hits into a She-Hulk because I know they might do some chip damage. And then as soon as Red Skull moves, counts, blanks, like take out Okoye all day with that. If you're using Red Skull to kill my 2-threat, life is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I think how I used to play it and where I would make mistakes or where it's not obvious is you get into such a default bodyguard mode on Okoye that it's like, okay, Okoye dies, and now you're coming in to do 2 counts blanks attacks from Red Skull, and that's not going to be good for me. It's about saying, what? She-Hulk has a budget of 20 damage, and I have Okoye and I have Sacrifice, but I also need to prevent Okoye from dying.
Yeah.
Taking small stuff on She-Hulk to keep Okoye alive for big stuff.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
it's subtle, but it's taken a bit of practice to figure some of that out.
That's so interesting. It's like because I remember, when A-Force first came out, I played around with it a little bit, mostly like to meme on people with it because I thought they were like it turned out a lot of goofy models that I liked. Iron Man was very bad back then, and Iron Man was pretty cute in that faction. And I also really enjoyed standing Venom next to 2 bodyguards that gave him plus defense. I also really enjoyed that. I'd be like, well, which one of these models are you going to attack? I have Lethal Protector and Sacrifice. And, but like that effect of standing multiple bodyguards next to each other is just like really interesting. Like if A-Force got a 3rd bodyguard model or a taunt model, like a Too Dangerous to Ignore model, like now you're really piquing my interest. Like stuff is going to get wacky so fast. And I hate to keep going back to like the shield well, but apparently it's all I know. I apparently don't play anything else and I don't know how to play any other things. But like, I think what's really appealing to me here are the same things that kind of appeal to me with shield. And like knowing when a thing is expendable and when a thing is not expendable, I think is a lot of why you're seeing success. Right. If that makes sense. Like, cause you know the answers to those questions. And it's like a hard thing that when people ask me for help with shield, that it's like, that's a thing you're just going to have to learn the self-discipline. You don't want any of your models to die, but you don't have enough tricks to keep everybody alive. Right. You're going to have to pick and choose.
Well, that's just it, because pretty much every major loss that I've had with She-Hulk and testing or any games is when I decide to get too aggressive with her, and then she just dies. Or Okoye gets killed in one shot at the beginning of the round, and then there's a follow me dark rain turn or something stupid into She-Hulk and she just evaporates, or all those things. So you're exactly right. There's the piece of who's expendable, because say Domino activates early and then later in the round, my opponent wants to attack Okoye to get her out of the way, I might just sacrifice onto Domino. Take 1 or 2 damage and she dazes. But if she's not holding an extract and she's already activated, her value goes significantly down. Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Especially if she's healthy.
Well, exactly. And you just wouldn't do it if she was injured, right? Unless it was the final turn and you're like, okay, that model can go. I need Beta Ray Bill to be able to move and throw someone to win the game, or, Voodoo to possess someone, whatever. And so you get in this cool thing where you figure out what models are expendable. Your opponents now think they're getting clever by killing your bodyguard, and then you sacrifice off Okoye sometimes, or bodyguard with She-Hulk, and then that, like, they just didn't see that coming a lot of the time. And then the other piece of it that I think other affiliations do this too, but knowing, like, if my opponent's Malekith has a stagger and he's on 9 damage and he's slowed and I threw him away, there's not a chance I'm going to daze him and let him wake up with 2 activations and no conditions.
Yeah.
It's like, I am perfectly fine leaving you. I'll kill Mystique. I'll kill, I'll go after Lockjaw if I need to, because I know it's just going to be such a poor activation, and I only want to daze you on the turn where I need to win, because you're not going to wake up and, be alive. So it's a bit of a mix of, like, what models of my own are expendable and what is the minimum amount I need to do in terms of damage and control to my opponents, because I don't want to overextend and get a lot of characters outside of range 2 of Okoye. So it ends up, I have to play a very tight and small game and can't get too adventurous, because it feels like the second they wander out of the compound, all of them just get destroyed. But when you take characters like Black Cat and Dr. Voodoo, who's possessed someone, they're really squishy, and stick them next to She-Hulk and Okoye, well, that becomes really tricky. And then maybe you have models like Domino or Beta Ray Bill or Red Skull's Grunts as an example, where they can go off and wander and score points, because either they're not as, they're more self-sufficient and tanky and they don't have an extract, and, with Red Skull's Grunts, they'll just come back anyway. So there's, it's like sending the tough kid out to fight for himself and then, protecting everybody else at home. It's this sort of, it has to be very deliberate, because they can get overextended so fast and just die. So it's a knife's edge a lot of games.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like, that's like part of the fun of it, right? Too, is like walking the knife's edge is like where a lot of that enjoyment comes from. I also feel a lot with like these defensive lists that you have to do as much as is necessary, but at the same time, you want to do as little as possible. Right? Where it's like, I need to commit the resources that will get the job done and then be done with it.
Yeah. And not to mention, like, not get greedy. I mean, there are points where it's like I see a scroll sitting on the ground. If I pick it up and get moved out of bodyguard range, that character will die when you get prio. So is it more important that I get this 1 point, or is it more important that this character is alive next round? And you those decisions come up way more often than you would think when it comes to how important are points, especially early in the game, if it means that key characters I need are just going to be dead. That part's really fun for me.
All right. So that seems like kind of like our high level approach to A-Force. Is like a lot of people build them wrong. There's lots of traps to building them because of like their design doesn't match the durability that it asks of She-Hulk. And then it's also just like, it's about staying in the knot, then like the Gordian knot in the bunker, and keeping everything safe and not overextending. Right. But let's get a little bit more into like the nitty gritty specifics of like how you've chosen to beat your list. I have up your lunch meat roster that's combined with Hydra. And I guess I kind of want to, so we've already talked about that, like, you feel like She-Hulk, Okoye, and Black Cat are like really core, especially with the meta that's running around right now. Can you just like walk me through what else we're doing here? Because like, so it's got a Hydra splash in it, which I think is really interesting. Why don't you just walk me through what we have going on here?
Yeah, for sure. So the list, like if I'm looking at the characters in the list, I've got She-Hulk, Red Skull 2, Beta Ray Bill, Doctor Voodoo, Spider Woman, and then Hydra characters with Winter Soldier and Baron Zemo, and then A Force with Domino and Black Cat, and then Okoye.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the decision is if I say that A Force is extremely strong into big high threat models, there's a flip side to that that says A Force isn't always very good into wide low threat models, or scenario teams that are going to do something stupid like take all the extracts off the board and make me leave my bunker and have my 6th threat just chasing idiots trying to add 2 dice with weight training instead of 4, and or God forbid just not attack me and give me any power for my leadership. And so it came down to saying, well, what's an alternate plan that I can dual affiliate that might have a weakness on their own into models like Malekith and Thanos, and have a complementary list there. So I've tried X-Men, testing Hellfire as an example, and I've found that Hydra is really fun and has a lot of complementary characters because you're bringing characters that are liking the power generation of both leaderships.
Mm-hmm.
I think A-Force generates more power and you can funnel it to one person. Hydra with Red Skull, gives everybody a bit of power and isn't reliant on your opponent. Like, you have the agency to put the power on your characters. So that's one piece of it. The other subtle synergies are that Red Skull, Bill, and She-Hulk all have a safe grab with eyes on the prize. And so when I pick my extracts, which are Skrulls, Hammers, and Research Station, Skrulls and Hammers, when I lose Prio, both have the ability to put either one of those or 2 of those 3 characters behind each Skrull or Hammer. And then my opponent, if they take one, I can take the other safely and, run back and hide in my bunker, basically. So in A-Force, I'll just give you an example. An 18-point list against Malekith on Hammers would be something like She-Hulk, Beta Ray Bill, Domino, Black Cat, and Okoye.
God, that seems like a nightmare for Malekith. Like, my God.
Yeah. Well,
you have to Beta Ray Bill too.
Oh yeah, like I had that. That was my that was my lunch meat team in round 3 into Cat Dog plus Mystique, and it's like you're taking 5 pieces of anti-Malekith tech. But the subtle piece is, okay, if I have She-Hulk and Beta Ray Bill on either side, one of them's going to grab it safely, and the other one with advanced R&D potentially, or if I get attacked, is going to be able to hit the middle and throw someone away and do some control. Then you've got Domino able to grab the backhammer and really tee off with that. And so, like, that works really well. Black Cat can usually steal on round 2. But then Hydra has a similar idea where Red Skull and Bill can be the ones who are challenging each hammer, and then you can have Winter Soldier, Baron Zemo, and Black Cat, or Domino. And, that plan says, well, now I have Winter Soldier and Domino in a reroll bubble around Zemo, and they're holding hammers, potentially. So both ideas are kind of reliant on being in this bubble. One just happens to be in a reroll bubble around Baron Zemo, getting lots of attacks off and using like sleeper agent Beta Ray Bill to go up and harass people, whereas the A-Force one is more defensive. So, a lot of people look at dual affiliations and say, well, what characters do you have in common? And it's very surface level. Mm-hmm. I'm saying I'm generally playing the same game plan. I like the same secures and extracts. And I actually play the list similar in terms of my positioning, but one is a lot better at taking giant models' attacks, and the other's a lot better when I have to proactively try and go kill stuff rather than play a more defensive shell type game. So that's why I picked the dual affiliation. The other synergies in there that are really cool is Red Skull is actually a very, very good 5 threat under A-Force.
Yes,
because
his weakness is power generation.
Well, and he just gets attacked, he can just get murdered. And so it fits with the idea that you can put him in his form where he is safe against collision damage. So it's like, well, if you can't throw into him, you've got to attack him. And he's got She-Hulk and Okoye standing next to him. So you can't really attack him either. And what you can also do then is send those grunts out to, a corner. Say you're on extremist, you send them out to a far D flank, or scoundrels, you send them out. And they're a character that can perfectly go to a far corner and sit there, essentially costing 0 threat. And my opponents don't really want to spend energy going after them to kill them when they're just going to come back, right? And, be healthy and contest. So there's some interesting teams, like at 20 on Skrulls or Scoundrels, you can have a team like She-Hulk, Black Cat, and Okoye with Beta Ray Bill and Red Skull, and be running this 6-wide team that has aggression, size 4 throws, staggers, can just make life really difficult. But then there's a Hydra pivot that would have something like Red Skull, Dr. Voodoo, Beta Ray Bill, Spider-Woman, and Baron Zemo, where every character is incredibly mobile, and I've got size 4 throws, I've got multiple extract drops, and a couple characters that can just, delete models off the board. And so I have flexibility to run the same plan, but with the caveat that one is a lot better into these wider teams and one is a lot better into narrow teams. And it's very complementary, and I think works quite well.
All right. Okay, cool. And then, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I guess, so you're also like really heavy on the extract steals here. Is that more of like, is that like tech picks for what I assume are kind of the rougher matchups for this squad, which are like, I would assume X-Men and Webs give you a little bit of trouble because they don't have to fight your bunker at all. They can just be not around.
No, it's twofold. It's definitely tech into those matchups where if I feel like I just need to get ahead on scenario, and when I have a leadership that generates power, it does really well into those extract steals when I can get, Voodoo's possession off earlier, Black Cat's steal off earlier, Spider-Woman getting her hop to get up the board and, start attacking and getting in range. So that's part of it, is I need to be able to steal extracts. The other part of it is, if I want to hide in my bunker, I need to go and get the treasure and bring it back to make my opponent have to actually come fight me in the bunker. So a situation, for example, where say I'm on hammers and my opponent, we each get 2 after the first round, but on the top of round 2, my Black Cat moves out of the bunker, steals the hammer, and then moves back into the bunker. Well, now I've got a 3-1 lead, and you're just going to have to come at me. Like, you don't have a choice now, because if I just sit there, I win.
Yeah, it's a way to change the status quo.
Yeah, because so part of the way to beat the bunker is, well, why don't I just go steal all your extracts and run away? It's like, well, you can, but I'm going to bring maybe even more steals than you, and yeah, I'm going to try to counteract that and say, if you steal them, I'll steal them back. If you attack me, it's going into my 2 threat. And if you come up to punch me, I've still got characters like Red Skull that can hit hard, Domino, or even She-Hulk, who into size force can throw basically 11 dice builders. And so I think it's something in this game that doesn't get talked about enough, is that if attrition teams can run things that steal extracts, you really force your opponents to come forward into your attrition. And it just seems like extract steals are reserved for scenario teams and everyone else is trying to kill you versus saying, if I just take the points, then you're going to spend actions moving and I'm going to spend actions killing you. And it's that whole just resource utilization or whatever you want to call it that happens when you can get an extract lead, what that actually does for your attrition.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So like, and then thinking about it now in like that same thing that I do with Shield, because I can't talk about anything else. But like we do that with our leadership because like we get a free point every round from our leadership, which breaks the status quo or sets it back to even, right? Until we can kill enough things that we're now leading. But you're just pulling things into your bunker, meaning like, hey, I'm fine not fighting you, right? I'll just sit here, I'll score 4, you can score 3, and we'll do this for the rest of the game. Right?
Yeah.
That's super interesting. And then like, okay, so then the tactics cards kind of incentivize that. So I assume no matter the cost is kind of in a similar way with spending it on Spider-Woman, and then also to try to get probably a cheeky early Black Cat stagger as well. Is that what it's in there?
It works really well for the early Black Cat stagger. That's like specific, Lockjaw teleports an Immortal Hulk or a Malekith up, and I want to discourage that.
Okay.
It also works really well on She-Hulk Spender, where the 5 power cost is awkward because you can't spend 5 weight training the attack and then have enough left for a throw, because that costs 11 power. So sometimes no matter the cost, you can set up turns where you punch someone to slow them, no matter the cost to stagger them, and then you throw them away, and they're slowed, thrown away, basically useless, and staggered as well. And so it's like, well, you don't want to take damage on She-Hulk, but if it means Malekith is staggered, his attack would do a lot more than, 2 or 3 damage into She-Hulk. So it's like, how am I spending my She-Hulk damage budget almost, if you will?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where my mind went too when you were like, thinking of She-Hulk's hit point pool as a resource that can be spent, and this is another thing giving you a way to spend it. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, my opponents lose if they do any less than 20 damage into She-Hulk. Like, or I should say, if their game plan is to try and kill me, they're probably going to lose if they don't kill She-Hulk after, round 2 or 3. And my goal with most of my scenarios is to try to kind of win in that round 4 range. And the knife's edge with She-Hulk and A-Force is you don't want to be so slow that you get caught in these grindy attrition games, but you don't want to be so fast that you get into X-Men and they just, take everything and run away, or, webs come in and eat your lunch too. It's just, it wants to be right in the middle and then be able to flex into whatever it needs to based on the matchup.
Yeah, it's like a true tempo team. And I think that's like kind of the most interesting thing, because I've been revisiting Wakanda with their new stuff about to come out. And they are like a true blue tempo team. They are about reading what is going on in the game and making the best play to tip the scales. Because they don't want an attrition, they don't want to run away, but they will do either at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so going down this sacrifice, we talked about a whole bunch. The advanced R&D is an interesting choice over more damage reduction. Why are we on advanced R&D here as our other restricted?
So I like advanced R&D or brace here. What I found is that if part of the strategy is that I want to take an early lead and be able to force you to come into me, often that means I want power in A-Force on either Beta Ray Bill or She-Hulk to be able to move to the center and throw somebody away with my last activation, and have positioned Okoye in a way that she's still ready to bodyguard that. And so I find on maps like Scoundrels and Intrusions to an extent, Demons to an extent, and Research Station for sure, those are areas that I want to be able to take the middle, move a researcher back into my bunker. I mean, that's the most extreme example of saying you have to come to my bunker. I'm just going to win the researcher and move it into my bunker, right? Like we're going to play the game literally in the center of the bunker. That's how we're doing this. And then in Hydra, it enables a play where Bucky can get 2 power to do his Hydra tactics and just start punishing the midline with attrition right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that, Bucky Hydra tactics off of Baron Zemo so that he's, 4 with a reroll from turn 1 and he just starts blasting. It gives the Hydra side a lot of tempo, as well as they still have an option to give a power to Beta Ray Bill for his sleeper agent throw or taking the middle. And then the idea with Bill in Hydra is that if on turn 1 he plays Eyes on the Prize to steal an extract, or he moves to the middle and throws someone off, either way he's starting with 3 power on his next turn and has his size 4 throw online again. So there's some subtlety that Advanced R&D does to having a stronger round 1, but I certainly, if you put Brace for Impact in the list instead of Advanced R&D, like I'm 50-50. It depends on the day what I think I should put in some ways.
All right. And I think the other thing that I get it. I think I'm right there with you. I think you've convinced me on Advanced R&D being really interesting. And my go-to, like Sack Brace are like my go-to restricted cards. All right. I think the thing that people are going to kind of be surprised here at is no Follow Me and no Patch Up, which were like staples of how I think a lot of people traditionally looking at A-Force built their restricted suite. Is like, it's a faction gives you tons of power, its leader has a huge hit point pool, and I want that leader to have a big hit, keep that hit point pool high. And I think when we were initially like, before everybody realized that Follow Me was a huge problem and like broken as all get out, you would see it occasionally, like even pre-restricted. You'd see it occasionally in A-Force because She-Hulk could fund it no problem.
Yeah.
So why aren't we on those?
Well, it's a choice that says I'm bringing a lot of characters that want to spend the excess power on superpowers. Mm-hmm. I want Bill to be throwing and spending. I want Voodoo to be throwing and possessing. Black Cat to be hopping and staggering and stealing. I also don't care at all about having prio. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so Follow Me in a lot of ways is a very strong card if you're running, Angela dropping off She-Hulk into the middle and punching up people and then having a Follow Me turn because neither of them can ever spend all their power. Like, it's certainly a fine A-Force strategy. It's just not at all what my list is trying to accomplish. And then I think Patch Up follows a similar logic where I'm like, well, for one, what I've found is if I'm sitting next to She-Hulk with Dr. Voodoo, I don't really want to be spending the 5 power off Voodoo to heal 5 damage on She-Hulk. Like, I want to use that to go score points and win the game. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking characters that really want to spend all their power and not just do it on healing. The other thing I found, though, is there's been too many times where Patch Up just doesn't matter. Like, I just die.
Yeah.
And then I can't patch anybody up. Like, Malekith with Follow Me and Dark Reign into Red Skull. This list has taught me a lot about redundancy. Like, if you just think Okoye standing next to She-Hulk will protect her, or just having Sacrifice will be okay, it won't.
Yeah.
Like, my opponent will burn all of their cards, and I'm going to burn a lot of mine. I'm going to recal one of the Dark Reigns. I'm going to bodyguard an attack. I'm going to, like, we're burning it all to survive, and then we're going to punch them back. But it's, it just, they're great cards, and they fit that game plan, but they don't fit the game plan I'm trying to achieve, which is maybe a more score-oriented, mm-hmm. which then allows me to play more defensively.
Fantastic. I also just think, like, talking about redundancy, every time I've played Patch Up, every game I've been like, man, I wish I could just have a second Sacrifice. Like, this would be essentially the same or better if this was just another sacrifice.
Well, it's very true. I mean, I would play 5 sacrifices as my my tactics cards, maybe an eyes on the prize if I had to. But
I
like,
would only play 3 in Shield, okay? Only 3 of them.
yeah, there you go. But it's having sacrifice is hilarious in this list because out of nowhere too, you've got Beta Ray Bill and She-Hulk often in the list who both have aggressive, and so it can be really funny to like, oh, Beta Ray Bill's out of range, that's fine. Okay, well, I'm sacrificing onto Bill. Bill's now aggressiving onto a point. She-Hulk does the same with her bodyguard, where they can eat attacks and use the movement to get into range to double tap or get back on points or that kind of thing. So it creates another layer, no different than your plays with Sacrifice and Hawkeye. It's like just another thing they got to be thinking about where they're like, I can't even attack anyone because I don't want She-Hulk to get back on that point and score, or I don't want to attack She-Hulk because then she's within range 2 of Thanos to double punch him, when I'd rather she just be over there. And they're playing this weird game that's like, to win I need to kill She-Hulk, but I don't want to attack She-Hulk. And it's that mental load on the opponents and that knot you talk about where they just, you just have a hard time. You don't really know what to do.
Yeah, people just also underrate aggressive as an ability, just kind of in general. Like, Shield's leadership when you're tied is aggressive, essentially. And so it has just trained me to constantly look for aggressive angles. And I will find myself playing like Spider Foes, like, this would be a really good time to aggressive. I don't have that on Mysterio, but it would be really good right now.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, what it does too is, in combination with a card like Fallback, which is probably my most played, like non-restrictive, when She-Hulk has aggressive and Fallback, it's pretty hard to strand her somewhere and not have the ability to either fall back into a bodyguard or sacrifice range or aggressive into it. Like, it gives her, 360-degree movement basically to go somewhere else. And then I'll usually take Recalibration Matrix as well to say, again, it's a 20-point health pool. You're normally chipping that 1 or 2 at a time, but one turn it's going to be 7, and I want an option to reduce that. And so everything is redundancy around stealing things and keeping people alive, because I generally find if I can steal things and keep people alive, then I win the game. So it's, that's kind of the plan with A-Force, if it was summed up in a sentence.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think Stalwart probably needs no explanation here. Stalwart is like the A-Force card after second special delivery, but you don't have special delivery here. And I think a lot of that is just because your list isn't playing any flying A-Force members at all.
No. The challenge is, like, none of the flying A-Force members, they don't steal anything, and they don't really throw anything, like characters.
Yeah.
Scarlet Witch and Angela are their mobility and damage. Crystal has long range and can do damage in some conditions. Like, I've played Storm. Captain Marvel's just not the
Storm would be the exception to the rule that you're talking about. Storm is the flexible piece amongst the A-Force flyers.
Well, and when I dual affiliate into X-Men, having Storm and Domino already affiliated and, key parts of a list, I would look at special delivery if I was dual affiliating that way. But just, in general, the crazy thing is between the TTS League and Lunch Meet so far, I've played Stalwart 0 times. So, like, at the end of the day, if I'm taking eyes on the prize, I'm taking 2 restricted cards, and then a combination of, no matter the cost, Recalibration Matrix and Fallback. It's like, maybe against, I haven't played teams like Web Warriors where their game plan is to push you around. But into a team like Cabal, stopping Malekith's throw for a turn versus being able to recal his Dark Rain attack into She-Hulk,
Yes.
the value is just night and day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely, it is. I also, I wonder if you think that like, I felt like pre 2023, like in 2022 and earlier, the game was much more secure focused, and the
Mhm.
game feels much more extract focused right now to me. Do you think like
Yeah.
you're playing Stalwart a little bit less? Is that as the focus shifts between the two crises?
Oh, it's been massive because when I used to play this list last year pre-crisis change, the whole fun innovation was the whole greenies and weenies concept, which was let's take double Hulks as much as possible with Black Widow and Okoye and even potentially Toad at 18 and just try to activate last on things like Gamma. And it's like, you can't kill me because Okoye bodyguards everything. You can't push me because Stalwart doesn't let you do anything. And I'm going to activate last, go throw someone off your back Gamma point, and I'm going to get 6 points off of Gamma. Or I'm going to jam the researcher down your throat, and I'm going to score, 4 points around because it's sitting on the thing and I don't have to contest it anymore. Or I'm on Deadly Meteors, I'm going to go last and flip the points, and I'm going to score 3-0. Like, those were three core high-scoring secures that I was very focused on the character throws and very focused on, like, scoring those high-scoring secures or research station to win the game. And that list got completely nuked when the three best,
Yeah, yeah.
the three
Best crisis for it just went away.
like they just disappeared, right? So it switched to like a use power to fund extract steals and protect extract holders versus stay safe and activate last with throws. So the very big picture concept didn't really change, but it took me probably 3 or 4 months to get an A-Force list again that I was really comfortable playing in like a highly competitive setting, because the old plan of double Hulks and Widow and Okoye, one research station turned to 15 points and you couldn't do that at 16 anymore, which was bad. But Gamma getting nerfed and all these things, it just didn't it wasn't very good. The nice thing is that Beta Ray Bill came into the world and gave me an extra size 4 throw for 2 threat left. And so you can now put in Voodoo and Beta Ray Bill instead of Hulk and Black Widow
Yeah, that's
as
probably an
that
upgrade
8-point
for you.
package. Right. Like it lets me play a similar plan, but it's better. And I don't have a size 4 character to risk getting thrown into She-Hulk or Okoye, so it does let me play with something like R&D instead of Brace a little more flexibly without that, monster liability just getting chucked into me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, and then to seamlessly transition to that, mission objectives, your last one that we haven't talked about. I assume this is just more in that direction of like the game is much more extract focused now.
Yeah, okay, you're playing Criminal Syndicate's playing Rhino, and Rhino is going to say, your bodyguard bubble doesn't matter. I'm going to come throw She-Hulk into Okoye and take your extract and run away, right? Like that play specifically is brutal for my list. Same thing with Voodoo just coming and possessing someone. And so having something like mission objective to take one more away from my opponent that they can't take my extract, especially into someone like Rhino or Voodoo or even Pyro's extract drop. It's just all supporting that idea that I'm going to be able to steal more than you, and I'm going to prevent it. And I happen to always be within range 2 of another character because of how I play.
Yeah,
So, like, there's just a lot of reasons that comes in, and it's, but, anti-Rhino tech is my 10th card into foes or, Criminal Syndicate, anti-Voodoo tech who's always around in X-Men, it seems. Those are just all reasons why I think it's still very strong for what I'm trying to do.
Oh yeah, Rhino doesn't throw you if the token doesn't drop, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
you also stay in the bunker.
Yes, and don't have, She-Hulk thrown into Okoye to Dazer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then Rhino's sitting there And if Rhino's sitting there burning this as a robbery, and then She-Hulk says, well, now I'm just going to punch you in the face with 11 dice with superior weight training and, throw you into your friends, it's really demoralizing. So I love your idea of trying, there's a finite amount of fun in the world. And I want, whenever my opponents are going like, I can't attack anyone right now. This is stupid. There's nothing I can do. Like, I feel very happy inside.
Oh, man, you're a man after my own heart. All right. So I feel like we've talked a lot about your extracts. Let's wrap up this list with talking about your secures. I think Gamma makes a lot of sense to me. It is like the turtle and tank up, tie your Gordian knot crises, right? People can't even choose to go wide on you or they take damage. It really just like focuses the entire board into this thin line. I love it. It's perfect. Don't ever change it. I love playing tight ticky-tack positioning. Don't ever change it, AMG. And me liking a crisis is definitely not a red flag. Don't listen to the internet. And then you have superpowered scoundrels and demons, which I always kind of think of as like opposites or like two sides of the same coin. They're like, or direct opposites of each other, right? Like one is a super narrow scenario that like makes you easier to kill. And the other is like a wide, high scoring scenario that makes you harder to kill. But you're playing both of these.
Well, the challenge is that if I don't like wide gunline teams, then Scoundrels is a very, very good option into wide gunline teams. And you start getting this effect with Okoye and Spider-Woman, where if they're standing on secures, in Scoundrels, they either have cover or they're counting blanks, against basically everything but Mystic. So this idea that says Okoye is going to stand on the middle point, you're either attacking her within range 2 to count blanks, or she has cover. It's giving some of those characters some extra tankiness. What I'm also finding is that when I'm bringing She-Hulk, Beta Ray Bill, Dr. Voodoo, I have a lot of characters that can now really play the secure game well. And because Scoundrels has that middle point and it's a little bit tighter, I find that you can actually play a very bunched up game in the center and still selectively go kind of hub and spoke and go score outer points fairly safely if you can keep it away from the action. So that's the logic on Scoundrels, is it's really good into a lot of the things I hate playing into. And, it's part of why I like it. And then Demons goes the opposite way, where it says, if I get an X-Men matchup, I want at least 2 of my 3 secures to be very favorable for me. If they're going to do their steal all the extracts and go up for 1 jank, I want to be able to say, well, I'm going to go right to the middle and I'm going to go after you. The other thing about Demons, though, is that 19 is a really good point value for bringing Voodoo and Beta Ray Bill for me, because the Red Skull Zemo Bucky core, right, and the She-Hulk Black Cat Okoye core are both 11. So adding that 8 points is really strong, and
it's double incinerate immune.
Yeah, double incinerate immune, and then if I also have Red Skull's grunts, it gives me kind of a 3rd immune character. And then there's also the idea that sometimes it doesn't matter if I have a few characters incinerated, because Okoye isn't incinerated and she's just bodyguarding anyway. So Demons is like a subtly very, very good crisis. I found that it's not necessarily obvious at first until you get into point values and the structure of it, like the E shape, and that I can divert a lot of attacks off of incinerated characters if they're not immune.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I think you've sold me. I like your thinking behind all of this stuff. All right. Let's try tie this up together in a nice little neat bow, see if I can accomplish it. So obviously you've done very, very well with A-Force. I think it's pretty hard to deny that. Because being number 1 on Longshanks isn't just about your win rate, even though your win rate is very good. It's mostly about who you beat. It's beating other people with very good win rates. And so even though I might be misinformed, I don't think you have a big tournament win under your belt yet, but you have taken down some big games.
Yeah, not in the U.S. I mean, we've had a pretty big 28-person event up in Canada, and our Ontario meta has a few. Lucas has been in the TTS final and things like that, so we've got that. But I'm really hoping that either one of the TTS leagues or maybe this lunch meet here or Second Win that I will be attending.
Dude, I'm so excited, and I don't have to play against you at Second Win because I'm not playing.
And I don't have to play against Shield,
there
which
you
is
go.
wonderful.
You might. I guess a lot of the big Shield boogeymen are not there. Like the good ones are like DeLuca, who's going to be. I think most of them are going to be overseas at WTC, and me. Yeah. We have a local here who's a little bit dangerous, but it's like one player. You got to dodge one guy.
Just got to duck one player. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Yeah, no, I found out I had a work event in Chicago 2 days prior, so it worked out about as well as it could to extend that trip and see if we can get the signature win under our belts to, I think, validate some of the good wins from the random A-Force guy in Canada.
There you go, man. So where do you think A-Force lands on the power rankings? Like, where do you think, like, you've done very well with them, but do you think people are like underrating them, or do you think you've just found this like hyper-specific niche and they're still low, or do you think people are just like, tell me about it?
I think A-Force falls into about as mid-tier as you could possibly get, but they happen to be very, very good into a lot of top-tier teams. And I think if you can dual affiliate properly for the really bad matchups, it's like, okay, if you're top tier into most of the top tier, but then can figure out a way to deal with all the other stuff, what does that make you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? Like most teams right now have two leaders where they can flex into a variety of game plans. I think you just have to take that mindset with A-Force and bring in a dual affiliate no different than you would a dual leader in most of the factions that are out there right now. And when I'm becoming a lot less reliant on having to have flyers in the list and special delivery and all that stuff, there's a lot more room to dual affiliate when you're not building under those constraints.
Yeah, and I'm just noticing this now. Hydra requires essentially no tactics cards because you're not splashing Sleeper Cell Hulk. You're not doing any of the...
Just Sleeper Agent Bill. He's awesome. I love Sleeper Agent Bill. That's a whole nother topic, but I've really enjoyed playing him in Hydra.
No, Sleeper Agent is on here. Okay, yeah.
Beta Ray.
There you go. Sleeper Agent Beta Ray Bill. Oh boy.
Oh, it's glorious, man. It's they don't expect it, and then he randomly goes and throws a size 4 truck into someone without brace or exceptional or all those things, and it does pretty well.
Yeah, because with Red Skull, you're going to be making 3 a turn, hopefully, so you just walk, throw, walk.
Yep. The classic plan of doing as little as I need to, scalpel the characters out that I need to and throw away the ones I do, and it fits right into the mindset of, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's perfect for how I like to play.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. Yeah. Well, this has been great. I don't know how this is going to go up or where it's going to go up. Maybe it'll hit the Alfredo's feed. Maybe it'll be on YouTube. I don't know. If we are on YouTube, do the important YouTube stuff. We like that. If not, just come yell at us on our Discord about it. So, Kurtis, where can we find you if we have more A-Force questions?
I think I'm on most of the Discords as just Kurtis O, so it's pretty straightforward. Just find me there, and I think that's the best place to find me. I'm always happy to talk about A-Force.